Today we're going to talk about a Christian vision of marriage. And as I'm doing this, it's my anniversary day. So I'm pretty excited to be doing this anniversary day. Anniversary day. I said to Nevaeh that I would start that way, so here I go. I want to talk about marriage within the context of a Christian vision of sexuality. And so that's why I begin with the question, why do you want to be married in the church? So we're talking about Christian marriage. We're not talking about just any old ceremony to satisfy the state. We're talking about Christian marriage. So as we talk about Christian marriage, we want to recall our Christian vision of sexuality and kind of the three main convictions that are running through that Christian vision of sexuality. The first one is the good of bodily life and sexual relations as we are created by God as embodied persons, social and historical, and out of that we have emphasized the integrity of body and soul. Next big theme is the fall sin that disrupts the goodness of the integrity of body and soul and disrupts the mutuality of our social historical relationships. So sin as a disruption of that original good. And then finally, redemption. The redemption in God that restores the goodness, restores the integrity of body and soul, and restores mutuality. So marriage, as we're thinking about that, we want to be thinking about those three convictions all together. The goodness, the sin, and the need for redemption. So historically, when we're asking why do Christians get married, why seek marriage within the church, Augustine, way back when, listed 4 goods of marriage. He talked about the procreation of children, the association of the sexes, the restraint of lust, the sacramental significance of marriage. And you can see in these 4 what Gouchy was talking about of partnership, procreation, and pleasure, with that added note about the need for a redemptive relationship, and that's where the restraint of lust comes in. How are these connected with a Christian vision of life, sexuality? Well, let's think about marriage as a vocation, as a call. Christians enter marriage in gracious thanksgiving for God's creative and redemptive ordering of loving sexual relations. So that's a big vision, isn't it? We're entering into marriage in gracious thanksgiving for God's creative and redemptive ordering of our sexual relationships. Marriage also provides or is a service within our service of building God's kingdom. In marriage, we are reflecting God's creative and redemptive purposes in our sexual relations. Also, as a call and as a service to the kingdom and as redemptive, marriage is public. It's a communal action. It's a social institution. It's personal, but it is never private. That is, marriage expresses our need for support from and life within a community that's for this faithful and committed relationship. As social and historical beings, we also recognize that this relationship will grow over time in relationship with each other and with others. So in marriage, we are marrying into a community that is surrounding the community that is marriage. Now, marriage also expresses our redemptive need for a public promise of permanence. This is what Gouchy is talking about in terms of the importance of covenant, that our vow keeping, where his discussion about adultery and thou shalt not commit adultery. The protection of marriage is in this vowed covenantal commitment. That is the protection that we need in our sexual relationships. because a lack of mutual commitment often leads to injustice in the form of sexual exploitation. The promise also signals a depth of commitment to the relationship that would otherwise be lacking. This publicness adds a serious sense of community that is not there just when two people say, well, let's live together. So this provides a context for intimacy and the growth of persons over time, our historical dimension again. Marriage also expresses our faith. Our faith in God gives us the hope and the courage to empower us to try again and again to become more loving and just over time in our relationship. So in this, we can see that marriage is holding together the partnership, the procreative/generative, the word we've been using, and pleasure purposes of sexual intercourse, of sexual relationships. We give of ourselves to each other in such a way that we are open to the presence of others in the relationship. And this includes children, but it also includes, for couples that do not have children, this broader commitment to the well-being of the community. All of this together underlines how Christian marriage is countercultural. That is, it stands in contrast to a kind of romanticism that sees marriage as only about the love between the two people and the attraction between the two people in the marriage. It also stands in contrast to the individualism in our culture that sees marriage as just a kind of a contract between two individuals, sort of looking as a transactional relationship. It's much more than that. It's a covenantal relationship, and so it's drawing us out of ourselves into relationship with this other person, but also in that is deepening our relationship with God, and it's calling us into this larger community of the beloved community, the kingdom of God. This is a high ideal, for sure, for marriage, but we're called to live into the vocation of marriage. But the reality that we know is also that marriage ends in divorce. Often marriages end in divorce. And so we want to think about divorce in relationship to sin. That is, the breakdown and end of marriages is a sign of power, sign of the power of sin in human life. We recognize that sin is a power in our lives that distorts and destroys a good order that God intends for human flourishing. We recognize the need for Christ's redemptive work to touch those who suffer in and from the end of a marriage and the dissolution of a family. Why is there more divorce today? There's all sorts of reasons that can be given. The increase in life expectancy, the higher, often unrealistic expectations that go into marriage, challenges to traditional gender roles, and the breakdown of social taboos around divorce and remarriage. So the reality is we're going to face, in ministry for sure, we're going to be facing the reality of that there are marriages that end in divorce. So then we want to ask, what's a good Christian response to divorce? Think here of the two goods that are at stake in this issue of divorce and remarriage. The first good is the commitment, the call within Christian life to see marriage as a lifetime commitment in which two persons give of themselves for the good of each other and of others in mutual love. The second good is this redemptive concern that recognizes the power of sin to break our relationships with each other and thus reaches out to confront that sin in a way that is redemptive. So every Christian church in response to divorce is somehow going to try to hold those two goods together in responding to divorce. So to affirm that marriage should be for a lifetime, but to recognize that there's this reality of divorce and how do we address it in a way that's redemptive. We don't want to just sort of say, whatever happens, happens. We want to have a kind of a pathway for people to reflect upon after divorce what has happened. how can we do better in the future, and how can we be renewed in our commitment to live into the Christian vocation of marriage. I'm going to offer just one model for this. It's drawn from the Catholic Church, and I'm really using this model because it's kind of simple in a way, but we'll be able to see in it the two goods that I'm talking about. The church makes a distinction between a divorce, which is a civil or legal process undertaken within the justice system organized by the state that addresses the legal breakup of the marriage contract. An annulment, which is Catholic Church language, declares that there was never a true sacramental or Christian marriage. Annulment addresses the sacramental or faith reality of the marriage. So it doesn't deny that there was a marriage, but it says the marriage did not live into the fullness of the Christian marriage ideal, that or call or vocation that we've been talking about. So when the church declares the nullity of a marriage, it's saying that a particular element or elements required for valid matrimonial marriage consent or the ability to fulfill the marital covenant commitment was lacking at the time of the wedding, and so the marriage was not sacramentally valid. Since the marriage was not sacramentally valid, there was in reality no sacramental marriage, even though there was obviously a civil and state recognition of the marriage. So the annulment process invites people into a place in which there can be a healing or redemption, not bringing the marriage back, but so the persons can be healed so that they can be prepared again to live into the fullness of Christian life. Annulment in this way takes seriously that there is a sin in the breakdown of marriage, but that sin does not have to have the last word. Now, the annulment process, I'm not going to go into the details except that there are questionnaires that people are asked. There are talking with people who knew the couple, getting statements from them about what they've observed about the marriage. See the emphasis on the communal reality of marriage. The whole idea is to get the people to reflect upon what went wrong. Where did I go wrong? Where did we go wrong as a couple that led to our divorce, the end of our marriage? What are the shortcomings with this kind of process within the Catholic Church, the annulment process? It's too legalistic, it's too expensive, it's not pastoral enough. But what it's trying to hold on to is the partnership, procreation, pleasure realities of the marriage. And that's what I want to end with, is not talking about divorce, but going back to the Christian vocation of marriage. Why get married in the church? We get married in the church because we see marriage as part of our Christian vocation. It's specifying our vocation and relationship to our partnership with another person, and that partnership is opening us up to this broader community of the kingdom of God, which includes the broader community of the church and often children or some other generative activity, commitment beyond the marriage itself. So there we are. We'll have lots of opportunity to talk more about this when we get into class.